Hey guys, came from Odyssey 7 owners, and today we're in my garage trying to find out if I hydrolocked my engine or not. So if you want to figure out if I broke my car, stick around. All right, everybody, as you can tell, we're in my engine bay, and you might notice there's no coil packs in that side of the engine. There's none in this side of the engine, and that's because there might be a chance that I had a catastrophic intercooler core failure resulting in hydrolocking my engine. So we're going to try and find out today. So basically the backstory was, yesterday I was driving and I noticed the car was kind of acting weird, just not as peppy, but not really underperforming, no misfires, nothing like that. I pulled over and I checked my divorce coolant reservoir and I saw that the fluid was a little bit low. I know there's no external leaks anywhere. I know that my heat exchanger is brand new, no leaks there. So I was like, okay, you know what? I remember a couple months I had to replace my intercooler core because the bung of the bleed screw broke off. And so I put a used one in there. And, you know, went to the tail of the dragon, performed flawlessly, had no issues. But I topped this off. The car drove home just fine. I gave it a couple pulls. There was no misfires whatsoever. Nothing that would lead me to believe that I had a really bad intercooler core failure that was resulting in like a massive amount of leaking. So I drove it home and I parked it yesterday and I was like, okay, I need to order some intercooler cores. It's fine. Went out to the car this morning to go take my son to a soccer game. Went to hit the ignition button. The car didn't even do a full ignition cycle. It just did one like ring, and then it completely stopped, shut down, and this massively high-pitched, loud alarm from inside the engine bay somewhere that I didn't even know existed went off. And the EPC light and check engine light obviously came on the car, and I was just like, there's only one thing, and that could have been that enough water leaked into the cylinder from the failed intercooler core and cause this thing to hydrolock, or at least, hopefully, to trigger a fail-safe system that the car recognized that, hey, this isn't working properly, and it shut itself down quick enough before I could have done any damage. You know, you think about it logically, there's not enough or not a ton of water in the intercooler core, so I'm hoping I didn't do any damage to the car. But yeah, I'll show you my spark plugs and I'll show you what I found so far removing all those. We're going to crank this engine over without any of the spark plugs in or the coil packs in to evacuate any kind of water that's in here. And then we'll pull a supercharger off and we'll replace that failed intercooler core with another one, and we'll see if I can get my car back on the road. All right, let's talk about what I've already checked and diagnosed before we go to turn this thing over. So the first thing I'm gonna bring you guys to is my workbench where I've pulled all the spark plugs and the coil packs. And all the spark plugs in terms of wear look really good. On my cylinder 6, there is what appears to be a little bit of maybe oil residue. And I looked into that cylinder and I could see what looks like maybe my valve cover gasket isn't sealing perfectly. So maybe that kind of dripped down in here, but if you get really close, it looks like there might be a little bit of water on that one. I'm not sure. I'm going to take a rag and wipe it down, and no matter what, it's going to come off black, but I'll try and figure out if it's oil or not. But on cylinder 3, you can't really see it now because it's been sitting here, but there was just legitimately standing water on the plug. You can actually see it there. So it looks like my driver's side of the vehicle intercooler core, so that would be bank 1, is the culprit leaking there over cylinder 3. Every other one is perfectly dry and looks really good and looks healthy. So yeah, so we're gonna take a look at that cylinder in particular when we get everything taken off. The other thing that I did was I scanned the car, and the only code that I have that's out of whack is it said starter malfunction. It says either mechanical failure or electrical failure. Hopefully it's just electrical. Hopefully this thing, you know, recognized something was wrong. The other thing I did do was I went in here and I used the supercharger belt to turn and try and turn the crank pulley, because if the crank pulley, you know, if this really did lock up, that crank pulley should not turn at all. And it actually has plenty of play. I was able to turn it by hand, probably about 2 inches. So that tells me that nothing's actually locked up in the car. At least I'm praying for that. Once it gets to top dead center, you know, it's, you know, trying to open up valves, it's a little bit harder to do by hand, and I don't have the actual tool to continue to try and crank it. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna set up my camera and I'm gonna aim it at the engine bay. We're gonna turn this thing over and we're gonna see what comes out. Okay guys, so as you saw from that video, we had a good amount of water come out of cylinder 3 on bank 1, which is the furthest to the rear on the passenger side. It looked like coolant coming out because it had kind of like a weird tinge to it, but I can promise you it was just water. That was dirty water from sitting on the cylinder head. I was concerned. I was like, why does that look like coolant? Doesn't smell like it or anything. It's just dirty water. But obviously I have a major failure on my passenger side intercooler core. I've already flipped this upside down and I can confirm it. You can see the water. This one does not appear to be leaking. It looks pretty good over here, but on this side, I've already kind of cleaned it up a little bit, but it was definitely really, really wet. So I'm gonna swap those out. Intercooler cores are not easy to come by these days, especially the more affordable options. So I gotta see if I can find a set. Looks like ECS might have the Moly intercooler cores that can get here in like a week. So I've got one more used one. I'm gonna throw it on here and just pray for the best until I can get some good replacements. I'm gonna go ahead and replace both of the intercooler cores once I get some brand new ones in. So the good news, the engine fully cranked. It turned over the whole time. There was no weird noises. It doesn't appear that we bent any valves or had any catastrophic engine failure. So really praying that we got lucky on this one. I'm gonna get everything replaced here and put back together, and we'll start her up and see how she does. Okay guys, I've got the supercharger all put back together. I've already swapped the intercooler core. If you are curious on how to do that, I should have a video up showing how to do that. So yeah, check that out if this is something you need help with. But in any case, I put a used core in here just because I had one on hand. I'm gonna go order some brand new ones to do this job again and make sure that I get these, nice and solid to go forward and doing, testing and whatnot on other products. But I'm gonna put this back onto the engine. I've got everything cleaned up to the best of my ability. I am going to put the supercharger back on, and I'll probably do one more crank without the spark plugs in the engine just to make sure we got everything out of there. Put it all back together, and then we'll fire it up, and I'll video the firing to see how it sounds, and fingers crossed, hopefully we did all right. All right guys, she fired right up, ran beautifully. I mean, she ran extremely smooth. I topped off the water in the divorce reservoir, took it for a drive, and it ran perfectly, as if nothing ever happened. So ultimately, what caused this? We know it was an intercooler core failure, but how? So a couple months ago, I installed a used intercooler core, like I said, because the bung off of my intercooler core I had on there snapped off, so I had to swap it out real quick. This one probably had a little bit of a leak that I wasn't aware of, but it slowly dripped water out of that. Had zero indication of a failure or an intercooler core leak because I got zero misfires whatsoever. So I had no idea. The car's been running great. But what it did was it eventually drained water out of the reservoir, and it caused the intercooler cores to run a little bit warm. My IATs, when I noticed it, went up over 80 degrees Celsius. I immediately pulled over and put water in there. That was yesterday. So what I think happened was that spike in heat. It wasn't a crazy spike, but that spike in heat really full on just damaged that one that was compromised already, causing this massive leak of water overnight that caused the lockup this morning. So I'm really thankful that it wasn't any worse than it is. So just another thing to pay attention to. I'm gonna try and get some brand new replacements to put into the car sometime soon, but overall I'm really thankful. So anyways, I'll see you guys on the next video.